This is Agriculture Today, and I'm Shelby Varner with the K-State Radio Network. Starting today's show is livestock economist Elliott Dennis from the University of Nebraska-Lincoln with a cattle market update and common topics from the recent NCBA conference. This week is Kansas Wildfire Awareness Week, and Kansas Forest Service's Eric Ward and K-State's Chip Redmond continue the show with information about mitigating wildfire risk. Another segment of Faces in Agriculture concludes today's show as Bryan and Gina Zesiger of Z&amp Twisted Vines, Wines and Winery in Douglas and Leavenworth County talk about their business and what they are looking forward to. That and more is coming up ahead on Agriculture Today. You're tuned in to Agriculture Today, and we start our Monday show with a cattle market update. And this week we're joined by University of Nebraska-Lincoln livestock economist Elliott Dennis. Elliott, thanks for joining us today.
Yep, thanks for having me again, Shelby.
Elliott, kicking off our cattle market conversation with what are futures looking like?
Yeah, so really this week has been an interesting week because we're coming off the cattle inventory report. I think there was an adjustment higher, but really what we've seen, at least on the feeder cattle side, is that really we've reached kind of this ceiling. And so we need fundamentals to continue to change, supplies to continue to show that it's going tighter for that market to go higher. So right now, really that market jumped up last week, really ended about 271 per hundredweight on the November contract. Then we're thinking it this week has the potential to move higher. And really it's kind of middled. It's really stayed between that 272 to 274 range, including today, Friday, it's moved down even lower. So showing that maybe we've overbought a little bit, so that's going to be interesting to kind of continue to watch. Particularly, that's on the feeder cattle side. On the fed cattle side, particularly on the April contract, is the one that I follow quite a bit and it's relevant really to a lot of Nebraska producers trying to hit that premium market. We are at about 186 here on the April futures. There's really kind of heavy resistance when we're at that 188, 189 frame, and really no real signs of struggling so far, but we will be bumping up against that probably next week. And so we're thinking about where we're at with as far as exposure and potential resistance in the market. That levels of resistance of 188 is there. The good thing is we did move past with the report this week. We did move past that kind of 182 resistance level as well. So some positive signs on the fed cattle side for specific months. And on the feeder cattle side, looks like there's just been some middling kind of going on.
Elliott, as we're talking about cattle, you were recently at the National Cattlemen's Beef Association event in Orlando. And while you're there, you mentioned that you heard a few different themes of conversation taking place. And the first one for us to discuss today is livestock risk protection.
Yeah, so this has been something that's been going on for a while. We know the USDA RMA has made some changes to LRP really the last couple of years to make it easier and more friendly for producers to use. Some of those being that they changed the subsidy rate. The premium due for the insurance policy is due at the end of the kind of endorsement length. And another one is they've increased the number of head that they've allowed to be marketed. So this has made it a lot more friendly. And frankly, it's changed some of the market participants. The big push for LRP in the beginning was that it could be used for non-uniform contract price risk protection. So think if you've got 30 heifers and 27 steers, how do you insure all of those animals as a cow-calf producer? That has changed a little bit, and that was kind of what the conversation was about there. And I know not everyone is a member of that, but I think it helps kind of set some of the stage on what certain people are thinking about and advocating for. And the first one was about, is there a potential need to continue to improve upon livestock risk protection? And really the concern was about this concept called subsidy harvesting, which essentially is that you could take a position in the futures market and get a reduced premium by buying an LRP contract. And specifically, this happens on days when the options or the CME futures market options market is expiring and LRP is available for that same ending date. And so what we've seen with data is that actually the number of sales of LRP on that day is much higher than the other days. And so we know that is happening. And so the question is, what does that effect on the market? And one of the committees there basically is going to be commissioning a study that's going to be going on over the next 4 to 6 months to specifically look at that question. Is there a price impact for people doing that? Now, whether people are doing that doesn't necessarily mean it's a bad thing. Just means it's a way that they've been able to find value in the system. But whether it's having an impact upon other producers and the volatility in the market is a different question. If it is, then we need to start thinking about addressing that potentially with regulation. But I think that's just something that's on a lot of people's minds, and the ability for that contractor and that price risk management tool to be improved and modified.
Something else, Elliott, that you told me you heard quite a bit about while you were at that NCBA conference was price discovery. Yeah, so this was some conversations that some of the feedlots were having, kind of in side conversations, was that, as we know, there's been a lot of conversation about minimum amounts of trade, thinning negotiated trade, and really whether it's impacting price discovery or that price that we're seeing is at the true price. This was noticeably left off in the agenda in the marketing committee. This is something that's kind of gone by the wayside a little bit at NCBA, and really is kind of brought to light of what is the industry kind of doing to kind of improve upon this for some market participants. And so this was just kind of more of an observation that by omission rather than something that was particularly talked about. And we know that USDA AMS is continually trying to look at this issue, particularly a survey that some producers might be receiving here this spring is a survey that myself and Dr. Tonzer from Kansas State will be releasing, really just asking participants about what is their preference for price discovery. And so when we're talking about the preference for price discovery, we're talking about what is the level of price discovery we want to have. And this is really important because we tend to assume that we all have the same level or minimum amounts of price discovery out there, but it's not necessarily true. And so when we're talking about trying to find an industry level of price discovery, that can really vary. So this is just something to keep your eye out that could be coming your way. That will be advertised through the local state organizations, and also through if you're part of an email listserv to the large feedlot magazines. So if you get that, we just encourage you to participate that and welcome your kind of thoughts on that. One more thing that we've talked a lot about, but still important to be talked about and thought through, is sustainability. Yep, sustainability continues to be kind of on the undertone for producers, and I think there was a lot more curiosity about what is the ability to engage in sustainable programs. We know as producers, we try to do the best we can, and we believe that we are a sustainable industry. That term gets used a lot, and so depending upon how you define it and whatnot. But generally, when we're thinking about sustainability in the terms of like, are we doing good management practices that promote environmental stewardship? Are we profitable? Are we taking care of our people? And so this whole idea about sustainability is not going away, and that's not necessarily something that's, I think, is a bad thing. I think we have a great story to tell as producers, and there's ways that we can be paid to continue to engage in certain practices. There was quite a few programs that were out there that were related to this, advertising to producers like, hey, if you measure soil, there's potentially premiums here. Hey, if you're engaging in these certification programs. I think the market is still kind of trying to sort out, but I was surprised actually at how much engagement there was with producers in questioning. For instance, we had the manager of sustainability for McDonald's was there engaging. So you had some pretty high level people who are really saying like, hey, we want to try to engage in this. And kind of the big takeaway for me was to find trusted intermediaries. So as producers, we may not be always willing or able to tell the story of sustainability. And we're not going to just walk up to, people at Chick-fil-A or at McDonald's or at Hy-Vee or these, big high-end restaurants and say like, yes, this is my story. And what those companies are looking for is they're looking for trusted intermediaries.
people that can be a facilitator between producers and them. And so finding those trusted intermediaries where there's value and that you believe represent your views and values is really important. And it kind of was my big takeaway. And we also just, so producers aware that, people are continuing to try to engage in how we measure this, and just something to keep aware of as we go over the next year or two, as really, I would say, the sustainability argument and the need to measure and quantify this really heats up.
As you were at NCBA and gave us a quick recap, now as we look forward, what are you looking forward to in the next couple months?
I think there's an excitement about the ability and the use of federal insurance programs. I think one thing that I'm interested to see is kind of the adoption and how wean calf risk protection plays out over this year. There was a lot of interest from people who are not part of the pilot program. So if you're not in Texas, Colorado, South Dakota, or Nebraska, you're not in the pilot program. So I had conversations with producers from Kansas, from Wyoming, who are interested in this program. I think everyone's interested to see how it kind of rolls out. I'm excited to see how that is and if any adjustments happen and kind of further adoption and how that changes producer profitability and ability to manage in a more uncertain environment.
Elliott, I appreciate you taking the time to join us today and give us some information about the cattle market.
Yep. Thanks for having me again, Shelby.
That was University of Nebraska-Lincoln livestock economist Elliott Dennis. If you'd like to see more from NCBA, I will link them in today's show notes on agtoday.net. We're cutting to a short break now on Agriculture Today, but when we come back, we're talking about wildfire awareness, as this week is Wildfire Awareness Week in Kansas. You're tuned in to Agriculture Today, and we continue our Monday show discussing Kansas Wildfire Awareness Week. And to talk about the week, we're joined by K-State meteorologist Chip Redmond and Kansas Forest Service Assistant Fire Management Officer Eric Ward. Chip, Eric, thank you both so much for taking the time to join us today.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Eric, starting off with you with some tools from the Kansas Forest Service, talking about how they can help maybe think about wildfire awareness, and the first one being the Wildfire Risk Assessment Portal.
Yeah, that's a new tool that just went online last fall. It's actually been a work in progress for several years, and a number of people have put a lot of work and effort into that, paid for by a grant we received a while back. And what that is, it's a website that's located at kansaswildfirerisk.org, and it allows any area in the state or even down to a specific location to look at on a mapping tool, identify what the wildfire risk there is, and get an idea of the areas that are most at risk from a wildfire. And then you can produce a report to actually get some suggestions on what might be done to improve the safety of that area.
So something people can just type their address into and see how much risk they have for wildfire?
Yeah, it's actually got two different levels of user. Anybody can get on it and look at, for example, your local home or your neighborhood or whatever and see what the risk is. And then for public safety professionals, emergency managers, community planners, people like that might want a more in-depth look, they can actually request and receive a free access to be able to look at a deeper level and actually produce a multi-page report for any individual property or wider area like a community.
Something else also from the Kansas Forest Service, the Ready, Set, Go handbook, and it just recently got a refresh.
Yeah, that was produced originally 8 or 10 years ago, I suppose, and was a joint effort between ourselves and the State Fire Marshal's office. And it was old enough, it was due for a refresh. That was also a long project for a couple people. And just, I believe, last week at the time we're recording this, it was updated in both print and digital versions that are available on our website.
What can people see within that handbook?
That one is specifically designed towards how to protect your property. It's not unique to your specific house, but it is general information on steps that any homeowner or landowner can take to make their home more secure if a fire comes. One of the challenges if we get a major fire like what we've increasingly seen in recent years is that if there's a major fire coming through an area, there are not enough fire trucks for every home. It's just a given that if there's a major fire coming, there will not be a fire truck at your house. there aren't enough in any community. And so it gives some ideas on how you can prepare your property, your home, your outbuildings or whatever to be able to withstand that fire so it will survive even though the fire department may not be able to show up at your place when the fire is coming through.
And what are a few of those things that people should maybe do around their homes?
It'll go into a lot more depth, but it'll talk about things like removing the flammable vegetation and stuff right next to your house. Don't pile your firewood right next up against the side of your house. We like having it handy in the wintertime so you don't have to go very far, but that means when springtime comes and the dry winds start, if an ember blows into that pile of firewood right up against your siding, your house is going to be in danger. Limbing up some of the trees so there's not a lot of fuel to carry surface fire on the grass up into the treetops where it could be much more intense and throw embers. Cleaning out gutters every year so they're not full of needles, pine needles and dry leaves and stuff like that. And there's much more, but those are some of the highlights that are a pretty common issue in homes and buildings all over.
And as we're thinking about Kansas Wildfire Awareness Week, wanting to mention the Kansas Interagency Wildfire Council, and what is that council?
That's a group that's been meeting for, I'm going to say, probably close to 20 years now. And it's evolved kind of through the years of exactly which organizations are involved, but it's a relatively informal group of state and federal agencies, fire department representatives from the State Firefighters Association, the State Fire Chiefs Association, State Emergency Management Agency, and different organizations that all have a vested interest in wildfire preparedness and response. And we meet roughly monthly during the year, but then when fire season really starts getting active, typically in the spring, but sometimes other times of the year, we'll meet more often and potentially as much as a couple times a week to just coordinate, touch bases. We usually get a good weather briefing from Chip on what we're looking at coming up. You know, is it going to be one of those times where, yeah, we're going to have really high fire danger this afternoon, but the sun's going to go down and it's over? Or is this going to be one of those times that it's several days of there's no relief coming, and that really changes what level of a response we need to prepare for? So it's a coordination and collaboration group. And we also, as a KIWC, we also promote things like Wildfire Awareness Week.
And Chip, talking about the weather and forecasts and how that all relates to fire, the Mesonet has some tools available for people to use.
Yeah, the Kansas Mesonet, it's a network of weather stations. We've got 86 across the state that we take that data, it's all real-time data, and we build a historical record with it. And we take that information, we send it to the U.S. Forest Service Wildfire Information Management System, and from there they're able to calculate things such as fire danger rating through burning index, which is a short-term parameter that looks at the flammability and wind and humidity component to fuels. Fuels, we're talking grass mostly in Kansas. And then also looks at longer-term drought impacts through a variable called the energy release component. By putting those two together in a matrix, we're able to get an estimation of what the fire danger is for these exact areas. And then we're also able to not just look at the current information, but the National Weather Service also puts in forecasts for every one of our weather stations. That data goes also into that system and spits out what our burning index and energy release component will be the next 7 days. And so we're able to assess our best estimation at 1,300 every day, so not quite in that peak burning period, so it tends to underdo it a little bit. We get the idea of what the fire danger will be out the next 7 days, and that gives us a good spatial look. But also if folks want to dial in and look at a specific location, they can also get it for their backyard. And so that's found on the Mesonet, Mesonet.ksu.edu. Go up to that menu. There's 3 bars in the top left. Hit that, and then go to fire, and then fire danger, and you can get that information.
And when we're thinking about wildfire safety, if people are per se burning pasture, so not quite the same as wildfire, important to look at the day they're burning, but then also in the future?
Yeah, you want to look at the concerns in the future. The fire danger of the day, if you're doing a burn, hopefully is conducive for your burn and will allow it to burn and also not allow for issues such as smoke or maybe too much fire intensity. But also you need to go back and check those burns on a regular basis, and that'll give you some fire weather forecast that'll tie into when you should be checking maybe a little bit more often, maybe more than just once a day, because you know the winds are going to pick up and you know the fire danger is going to be a lot higher, say 4 or 5 days out. That'll give you a good idea of when to have more caution.
As we've been talking about wildfires, also things associated with those like homes and fire trucks, and how does the Community Wildfire Defense Grant possibly play into that?
That particular grant program is for communities. It's not for individuals. but it's a two-phase part of some of the spending bills that happened over the last several years that is providing a pretty large sum of money to be spread around the country. The first step is to develop a community wildfire protection plan. And so if that grant is awarded, it can be used by a community to develop that plan to identify areas of risk and what can be done about it. Once a CWPP, a Community Wildfire Protection Plan, is in place, then a community can apply for a defense grant to implement that plan and get funding to actually do work to create fuel breaks, to reduce fuel loading, or do other things to improve fire safety in the community. So it's a two-pronged one, to create a plan and then to actually implement the plan. We've got several counties that have applied in this last round. Those are actually being scored nationally right now, and hopefully in the next few weeks we'll hopefully hear that several counties in Kansas are receiving some funding through that. And then next time around we'll be working on helping them get some funding to implement some of that work.
As we're thinking about wildfire safety then, what are those few tips or tricks or things you really want people to keep in mind?
Well, of course, we want to avoid unintentional starts, not engaging in things on high-risk fire days that are likely to cause a fire. As Chip alluded, talking about the Mesonet, if a person's planning to burn, look at the forecast and the fire danger on that page and look what it's going to be over the next several days. We've seen several pretty substantial fires in recent years that were burned on a good day. It was a great day to burn, but they hadn't looked ahead to see that the next day or day 3 was going to be hot, dry, and windy. And some ember that's still there has whipped into flame and created real problems. Again, cleaning up around property and making sure there's not lots of ignitable debris around a home or something that you care about. All of those are going to be valuable in preventing a tragedy.
Eric, if people want to find out more information from the Kansas Forest Service, how can they do that?
Well, our website is simple. It's kansasforests, with an S on the end, .org. And there's a variety of information on there and links to a number of other tools that are available as well.
Chip, Eric, I appreciate you both coming in and sharing some information as we enter Kansas Wildfire Awareness Week.
Thank you for having us.
Thanks for having me.
That was Kansas Forest Service Assistant Fire Management Officer Eric Ward, and he was joined by Kansas State University meteorologist Chip Redmond, and they were discussing wildfire as this week is Wildfire Awareness Week. If you'd like to check out some of those resources from the Kansas Forest Service, you can do that by going to their website, kansasforest.org. If you'd like to see that tool from the Mesonet, you can find it by going to Mesonet.ksu.edu. That spelling is MESONET.ksu.edu. I will link them in today's show notes. We're cutting to a short break now on Agriculture Today, but stick around because we have more for you ahead. You're tuned in to Agriculture Today, and we conclude our Monday show with another segment of Faces in Agriculture. And this week we're joined by people in agriculture on the Douglas and Leavenworth County line here in Kansas, Bryan and Gina Zesiger. Bryan, Gina, thank you both so much for taking the time to join us today.
Hello, everyone.
Hello, and thank you for having us on.
Bryan, can you tell us a little bit about your operation?
We are a farm winery, and I'm the Z with Zesiger.
And I'm the M Montalbano, so we like to put our letters together and say we are twisted in life, love, and wine.
So how did you guys get started?
Gina and I met later in life. I was still active duty in the Army. Gina was a principal in Missouri, and we wanted something to do together. And
we're a hobby gone wild, and now a 100-acre farm with, almost 40 acres of sheep, and we handcraft all kinds of amazing wines.
We didn't want to go with just traditional, which we do, but we like to have a lot of variety. So we do 50 different wines with even 8 different hard ciders, all made right here on the vineyard.
Is there a little bit more than just wine and ciders at Z&amp Twisted Vines?
Well, it's a whole experience. And so, we say come for the wine and stay for the experience. And so, having people into our tasting room and enjoying what we have provided, which, is a little unique and twisted, allows us to tell our story. So, Bryan was an Apache pilot in the military. So we have this fire line kind of in his homage. And so it has a little jalapeno twist to it.
Well, and then my wife is first generation Italian. And so we have some Sicilian Italian wines named. And then we also make jellies and soaps and scrubs from the sediment of the wine. So we've expanded into all sorts of fun areas of agriculture.
And what have been some of those challenges as you've expanded?
Being not that when you say Kansas, you don't think of grapevines, and being a specialty crop here, it's just breaking through that glass ceiling of, hey, look, grapes are great here in Kansas, and we can make phenomenal wine. We have, everything here to make or grow grapes and then make wine.
So, as being involved in agriculture and just trying to get the word out there that as vineyards expand in our state, we've tried to work really hard to let people know Kansas wines are pretty amazing, and it's a great place to spend some time with people coming out to experience our vineyards and taste some wines.
And what have been some keys to you guys succeeding and being able to continue to expand?
Really, there's been some great organizations that have helped us learn and understand agriculture here in the state of Kansas, whether it's a Kansas Farm Bureau, Kansas Livestock Association.
Being retired from our other roles as we transitioned to full-time doing this, we lost our community. So it's been amazing to build a new community, not only in Leavenworth and Douglas County, but within the agricultural larger community of Kansas and fitting into that puzzle. So we try to be as active as we can and advocates for vineyards and wineries in Kansas so we can celebrate what we have.
What makes you guys excited when you look forward in agriculture then?
Well, the most exciting thing that's coming here soon, and you are getting the scoop on it, is we will have an AVA coming here, which is the American Viticultural Association acknowledgement of 34 different vineyards and wineries here in Kansas. It's the first one ever in Kansas. And if you don't know what that is, you've heard of Napa, you've heard of Herman. That's the same recognition at the federal level. That's exciting.
Yeah, so that news will be released shortly, and we'll be putting together our Kansas Viticulture and Winemaking Association, a kind of a launch and an invitation to everybody, and that will distinguish our wines and allow us to be on the map.
If people want to find out more information about Z&M Twisted Vines, where can they do that?
We are all over social media.
Also our website. So we are ZMTwistedWines.com on our website. We ship right off the website as well, all across the U.S. But our events and activities that we host on our vineyard are also listed there. So the website's a great place to always see what's going on.
That was Gina and Bryan Zesiger from Z&M Twisted Vines in Douglas and Leavenworth County. I will link their website in today's show notes on agtoday.net. That's all we have for you today on Agriculture Today, but we'll be back with more for you tomorrow.